Welcome everyone to today's Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program webinar on applying for a non-competitive award. My name is Christine Bevick and I'm one of the Program Deputy Directors here at RTI International, supporting the Cultivating Healthy Environments program here. RTI is responsible for supporting EPA's EJ Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program in Region 4. We're an independent nonprofit dedicated to improving the human condition. We provide a wide range of research, development, and technical services to local, state, federal governments, nonprofits, and commercial clients worldwide. But for this program, our focus is really on Region 4, and especially for this evening. Within RTI, Grantmakers is held out of our Transformative Research Unit for Equity, affectionately known as TRUE. And that division is really focused on transforming traditional research practices and mindsets to reimagine and create systems that advance equity and social justice. So joining me today from the TCGM and React for EJ teams, I'm pleased to also welcome Manisha Das and Tatiana Bustos. And so they'll be helping with the questions and answers that you have or helping answer the questions that you might have today, and then also helping us facilitate our open Q&A towards the end of this. All right, and so let's start to dive in. For today, the goal of this webinar today is really to help you feel more comfortable about applying for this program, and specifically the non-competitive funding opportunities. You might wonder, like, is this the right program? Is it the right opportunity for my organization? And hopefully by the time you leave today, you'll have a better sense of that. In addition, we're also going to be reviewing the program goals and guidance for the Cultivating Healthy Environments, Environmental Justice, Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program. So for Region 4, supporting that, hopefully you'll be able to understand the differences between the competitive and the non-competitive process, identifying what makes an organization severely capacity constrained, and perhaps identifying it with some of that criteria to see if your organization applies. And then we'll be focusing a large portion of this on discussing the key elements of the application, so that we can really dig into what we're looking for non-competitive awards and how they're going to be evaluated by our Community Advisory Board. All right, so quick overview here of our program. As a quick refresh, I just want to take a moment to review the intent and aims of the EJTCGM program here, and what that entails. So snapshot here is that this EPA's Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program, EJTCGM, I will start going with TCGM now that we've said it a couple times. It is one of the largest investments that EPA has made to address climate change and advance environmental justice. The program is designed as a pass-through, whereby EPA passes the funds through the grant makers to distribute and manage smaller subawards to community-based organizations, thereby making this process more efficient than the traditional grant-making process. So that way you're not having to wait 9-12 months to be able to hear about an application. So the goal here is that we've designed the program to provide those funds to community-based organizations and other eligible organizations to quickly support the planning, assessment, and development of community-based projects. Next slide. All right. So projects funded under this program are really intended to directly benefit and empower communities to address local priorities. As you're preparing your organization, as you're preparing your application, this is one of the key points that you should really focus on incorporating into the project descriptions, the activities that you're planning to do, and how you're going to be assessing success. And we'll be covering those today about how to frame those and how to best present them. So when we're reviewing and making decisions, and by we, the reviewers and the community advisory boards are going to be looking at how well your project application responds to the program's aims of, one, addressing long-standing environmental and health challenges within historically underserved and disadvantaged communities. Two, improving the health equity and resilience of underserved communities. And three, benefiting disadvantaged populations. So moving forward, first check is regardless of whether you're applying for a non-competitive or a competitive funding, applying organizations must be an eligible entity. So your organization must fit into one of these categories. When you are doing the application, you'll also see that there's an other category if you're not sure exactly where you fit. If you are an individual, a for-profit business, or state government, or what's not listed here is a 501c4 or a nonprofit organization engaged in lobbying activities, unfortunately, you're not eligible to apply. And one of the things that we want to do is to really make the turnaround pretty quick. So in the event that your organization does apply and you're found not to be eligible for one of these reasons, we want to let you know as quickly as possible. So you're not going to have to wait that full turnaround there. All right, next slide. So under this program, there are 4 opportunities. So your organization should choose which opportunity best fits your project. And there's nothing that prevents you from applying to all 4. However, we really want to make sure that if you do submit a project that the same project to multiple opportunities, you may be asked to prioritize. And if you also apply for the competitives, your application may not be considered under the non-competitive category, and that's a determination that's made that will be made by our community advisory boards. So if you're considering applying for a non-competitive, your organization should really focus on that application first. And in the next webinar, in the next few slides, we're going to dig into why that's the case. All right, so we've got that focus there. Let's start digging into this. All right. So first, let's review the differences in the application process. So what's the difference between competitive versus non-competitive? First off, it's the program definition, that first box there. And then the next part is the review process. So as an organization that's applying, you're still going to have to fill out all 4 sections of the application. When you go into SM Apply, so if you go to apply.thrivingenvironments.org and create your account, when you go in there and complete your eligibility, you'll see the Region 4 program. When you go in there, then you hit the apply button. If you're applying for a non-competitive or a competitive, you're going to click the same button there. And then whenever you get in there, there's you'll have to answer all the questions about the organizational information, but the difference comes into play during the project information. And that's the section where there's fewer questions about your project. Which means that the length of your application is going to be much shorter. So we do have separate webinars on describing your organization, which we had, oh goodness, was that yesterday? It might have been yesterday. But we do have the recording for that we're able to share. And then upcoming, we also have our budget webinar as well. So we left off that 4th part about submission questions because those are pretty easy, and we'll touch on those in today's session as well. But a large part, what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on those dark purple boxes and that reduced set of questions that you're going to be asked as part of a non-competitive application. All right. So if you have the notice of funding opportunity with you or nearby, or if you're reading along, you want to go to page 17 and 18 of the NOFO, and that's where this information is going to be. So this is a funding opportunity that's intended for severely capacity constrained organizations. It is technically it's under the Tier 1 assessment, but the intent is really to make funds available for severely capacity constrained community-based organizations or entry-level applicants. So if your organization has never applied for funding before, this is the opportunity that you want to apply for. So these funds are intended to help organizations during those initial steps of the work, to address specific issues that are impacting your community, and that will help you to begin conducting the assessment and planning to address those environment and public health concerns. The key points here for the non-competitive foundational pieces is that these are the initial steps. So these should be getting you started or getting you ready to better understand and address a specific issue in your community. So if your organization may not fit, we're going to go into the definitions of severely capacity constrained, but if the focus is really on addressing an issue within the community, and perhaps you've hit a wall previously in terms of your efforts due to limitations in your organization's capacity, this is also the opportunity we want you to apply for. So if you've just reached the limits of being able to get to that next level of communication and outreach and engagement, this is where you can use this funding to be able to help boost your organization's capacity in that space. Non-competitive projects can also be used to support organizations needing assistance to just develop that basic organizational capacity prior to executing a full-scale project. I'm going to keep using the word project because there's a beginning, middle, and end, even with these foundational support pieces, because the funding for these projects is up to $75,000 for 1 year. So your budget can be less than 75,000, and your projects can be less than 12 months, but we don't recommend that they're any shorter than 6 months. Typically the turnaround, and Alexander, this is a really good question that I see over there about what's the turnaround timeline for approval to release funding. And so for this, once your application is received, our goal is to be able to get those decisions turned around with under 6 months. Eventually, we want to get that down to closer to 3 months, but you'll be able to track that within the system also to be able to see where exactly your application is in the process. All right, let's look at how we're defining a severely capacity constrained organization. So what do we mean by that? EPA recognizes that each region is unique and each grant maker is thus responsible for defining severely capacity constrained organizations. So for this program, what we wanted to do was we wanted to really not make it too constrictive in terms of the definition. So your organization may be considered severely capacity constrained if you meet at least one of the following criteria. So one, if the physical address of your organization's mailing address, so as you're going through the organization information, if it's located within an IRA identified disadvantaged community. And IRA identified means using the Inflation Reduction Act layer that's designated zip codes and census tracts as disadvantaged. So this is where the CGES tool comes in. Oh goodness. Tatiana, Manisha, I'm going to have you look up what CGEST is, and if you can drop that link into the chat, that will be great to help folks. Do you have that, Manisha?
I don't. I'll look it up right now and put it.
All right. Great. Awesome.
Somebody just did. Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. Thank you, Amanda.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It is 6:45 Eastern time, so we've all had long days. So the second criteria, which is the broadest category here. So if your organization is not located in one of these communities, that's okay. One of these other categories might also apply to your organization. So this second one is the most broad, and it's done intentionally. And this allows the community advisory boards to have that discretion. So whether your project, so the criteria here is whether your project intends to benefit a disadvantaged community. And so your organization may not be physically located in the community, but the work that you're doing is going to be benefiting a community that is identified as disadvantaged. And the community advisory boards have that discretion to be able to take these into consideration as they're making decisions about the funding. So one of the key things here is that, as we mentioned, reviewers, and as we mentioned, the decisions around things, the funding decisions are made by the community advisory boards. As grant makers, RTI and our partners, we are simply helping to make sure that organizations are eligible and ready to receive that funding. So that initial administrative review is really to help identify points where your organization can be successful moving forward with a project. And that's kind of where this last criteria comes from. So lastly, if your organization's budget in the last fiscal year, so however you define your fiscal year, whichever month it starts with, if it was less than $500,000, then your organization would meet the criteria severely capacity constrained. And so that is in the budget question of the organizational information piece. There's several options to choose from, but if your organization didn't have a budget last year, then you certainly were less than $500,000. But this is where, if you're on the fence about whether or not um, to check that box for prefer not to answer, this is where you might want to reconsider that and just select the option that best fits your organization. All right. Whew, this section's over. So let's go look at the application questions that you're going to have to answer for this program. Okay, so as I mentioned, the application's divided into those 4 parts. And so you'll be asked to answer all of the questions in the first part. So these questions are the same again, whether you're applying for a competitive or a non-competitive. But the bolded questions here are really where you can help your organization to shine as you write your application. You can share about your organization and describe how you may be limited or constrained or challenged by your current capacity, and how this funding is going to help to support and address a key issue in your community. Um, so with that, just as a quick navigation piece, as you're going through, if you want to go to jump to a different section at any point in time, you can use that menu over on the left-hand side in the SM Apply platform to be able to move around in different sections. You'll put a title in there where it says sample project, but you'll choose something that's a little bit more creative than our test program here. All right, so let's go ahead and look at that first question that's open-ended um, and move forward with this. So this section here, this question is the first one that's open-ended. And one of the things in designing the program is we wanted the questions to be shorter. We didn't want that as an organization for you to have to worry about writing out long narratives, pages of length. We wanted to make this very straightforward, 500 words to be able for you to, share the information that's most essential for the application moving forward. So this one, you have about 500 words, up to 500 words, which comes to about 2 to 3 paragraphs. And we also you can also consider using bullet points as you're going through and presenting the information. There's nothing that says that it has to be in paragraph form. But what we do ask is that in drafting your response that you're addressing each of these 4 points. So 1, whether your organization has received grants or other funding from the federal government. And if you haven't received any federal funding, this is where we want to see, like this would be our first time getting federal funding. Or we've received funding from private foundations, but we've never had that opportunity to feel that we were successful for federal funding. So this is where you can share that information there. And then the second part, which ties into that, is some of the challenges that you've faced, or that you've encountered, or that you felt that your organization has in receiving funding from the federal government. And this one you don't have to spend too much time on because actually that next open-ended question is all about the challenges. But this is where we want you to highlight those as you're describing your organization. Now, what I put in here around putting the pieces together, because there's a lot of different sections to your application. And one of the things is the application system itself is very linear. It's going to go one page and then to the next page and then to the next page and to the next page. And that's not really conducive for being able to organize thoughts and ideas. So one of the things we want to do is really to encourage you to write your application in a Google Doc or a Word doc, or just somewhere else where you and anyone in your organization can draft, you can edit, you can organize, review, and revise as you need to. So as you're going through and putting those pieces together, this is a great place to be able to check also that you're hitting all 4 points. So the next two items that we want to make sure are captured in this question are for you to tell us about your organization's experience working on environmental and health related issues. So really tie it back to the intent of the program here. So we want to know what your organization does to address these issues in your community. So you might already have some language about your organization that's on your website or in a brochure or some other location. So hopefully with this, your organization doesn't need to start from scratch in describing what you do. So you just need to capture it here so you can address this point. The fourth point is about your organization's experience working directly with your community on projects and issues. And so this could be if this is a newly emerging issue and we're looking to build our community's connections with the community to address this, or we've been working in the community for 20 years and we are very familiar and have deep roots into those communities, or you might be somewhere in between, and that's perfectly okay. And what we want to hear here in this question here, or this response here, is about that experience and the words to that. So when you're going through these 4 points, this is also where you can go back to and refer back to that criteria for severely capacity constrained. So if you are not meeting the geography or the budget criteria, this is where you can speak to how your organization and the project work that you're going to be doing is going to benefit a disadvantaged community, and how your organization is working directly with them. So just going into this, one of the things you'll see here down at the bottom for where these are longer, and I say longer 500 words, where you're going to be writing is just don't rush it. So when we were pulling us all together and we needed to get our OMB approval for this, we had to think about how much time it was going to take for that it might take applicants to be able to draft 500 words. And that includes the time that it takes to review any of the information about your organization, to make that phone call, to send the email, the text going, hey, where did we put that paragraph? To be able to pull all of that information together and be able to start drafting that response. So ultimately in that Google Doc or the Word document, or wherever the notes file that you're working in, that's where you want to get to the point where you can just copy and paste it into the application to make it really easy as you go forward. And so that's a really good question I just saw pop up there about on point 3 here about experience working on environmental and health related issues. For this, the question was, for point 3, can we speak to our professional experience not directly tied to our current organization? So if you are part of the organization that's applying or supporting the organization, that's part of the expertise and experience that that the applying organization should have. So you can certainly say, like, we have members who have extensive experience in this space. And that's where you can highlight that expertise. The follow-up question, Melissa, you asked about the 500 words. That's going to be for all 4 points. So that whole paragraph, tell us about your organization. You've got 500 words to do that. The system won't let you do any more than 500. It's going to cap out, and it's going to tell you how many words you have, words you have left to be able to answer. So if you're over, it's going to stop allowing you to enter in the information. So yeah, so that's definitely a limitation there. All right, so the other question for that point 2 about the challenges piece. So this is where there'll be the in between the tell us about your organization, there's the budget question that'll be asking you about what your organization's budget was for the last fiscal year. But then the next question is another one of these where you have the space to be able to respond. So here, this question asks you to briefly describe any challenges that your organization may have had in applying or completing federally funded work. And so there's a couple of instances that are listed here. And this is where in the previous question for item 2, you might have introduced the challenges your organization has faced. So you can highlight those there. But you've got 250 words for this section to be able to really expand on that. So if you're finding where you're a little bit more constrained in that first for those first 500 words, this is another place where you can expand on that. And again, why it's really helpful to work outside of the application platform as you're drafting these. So this is also, it's not just the challenges, but it's that the opportunities that this funding will help to provide for your organization. So it's a really great place where you can highlight where you want to be building capacity, where you want to reinforce the foundations of your organization. So if you've been limited in your ability to manage financial and accounting systems, you can highlight that and how you want to build your capacity and financial health for your organization. You can also think about how about organizing your response to identify what might be a challenge, describing what the barriers have been, and then how the funding can help your organization provide a solution. So if you've got a challenge, what is preventing that? What do you need to overcome? And then how this support is going to help with that. So um, for any of these, you can provide that bulleted list. So we really, again, we want you to keep these kind of more concise so that you don't need to think about hiring a grant writer. These aren't long enough for that. But making sure that you do also have you're not, yeah, if you're the one pulling together the application, that you're not the only one that's reading it too before you submit. So just some additional thinking points that we put here. And again, yeah, these slides will be made available. The recording will be made available online as well. So you can think about what are some of, this is where you want to think about what's prevented your organization from pursuing federal funding before. What are some of the barriers that your organization has encountered? Part of that is also one, to identify how your organization has been constrained in the past, but also where we may be able to further help you through providing additional technical assistance through the award process so that you're receiving those additional supports to move forward and identify future funding sources as well. So this is not only helping with your application, but if you're selected for funding, also being able to make the most of the time that you have. All right. Let's dig a little bit more into the project. So again, regardless of whether you're applying for a competitive or a non-competitive, we want you to think in project terms. So, and by that, what we mean is that there is a start, there's a middle, and there's an end. These are, again, they're bound by up to 12 months. And for the project type, this is where you're going to start to differentiate your application. So when you get to this, now we're into the purple box from that diagram from before. From the drop-down menu, you'll select your tier 1, which is foundational support, non-competitive. And what that's going to automatically do is it's going to get rid of all those extra questions that the competitive applications might ask, and they're just going to focus on the non-competitive questions. So you won't even see those other questions there. So for both of these, the next part, you've got your project title. So we want you to put a descriptive title in there about what your organization is going to be doing, and then how many months you're planning for to complete this work. And so for both of these, there might not be a the lightning bolt of here's a really creative title. But for both of these, you can come back and edit before you submit. Excuse me. All right. So the next question, is about identifying the areas in which this funding is going to help you build capacity. So regardless of where your organization is, any organization can apply to all of these categories. Um, you could check all that apply, but that's really what we want you to do instead, um, is to focus on two, three, maybe four of them for your project. So really think about which ones are going to be the most critical and most important in um, supporting your organization in the efforts to address local issues. So really, where are you having the greatest need for assistance? So you can think back to your challenges that you listed out in the previous question, and look at those challenges to see how they might line up with these different capacity areas. So in that earlier example where we were talking about challenges with accounting, and this is where you could check financial health, because it might also, there's financial health, but it could also be staff management and human resources, because now you're bringing on people. You can actually start to pay all those volunteers that have been giving so much time and energy to your organization. But now you've got to worry about payroll and accounting, and that is a whole nother ball. And that's where this support can really help to make that possible, in being able to establish those infrastructures to help your organization. If you've got an area of capacity building and you're not really sure where it fits, we do also have that other category that you can use, and you can provide a brief description there as well. So while we're on here, you'll notice is that at the bottom of the page, whenever you get to the on the platform, at the end, there's those buttons. There's previous, save and continue editing, and next. So next is going to take you to the next page. If you are working on that page and you haven't selected anything and you click next, it may give you an error message. If that's the case, just if you've got an open-ended, like just to tell us about your organization, or something else, just select something and you can come back to it to enter in the full information before you submit. So that's how you kind of can get through the system to be able to move on to other questions that are going to be a little easier. They're more multiple choice, like these ones. If you're on this page and you're like, you know what, I'm done for the day. Like, I need to log off. I've got to go. That's where you can click the save and continue editing. What that's going to do is just going to save where you are on that page, and you're going to stay right there. Next is going to save it, and then you're going to go on to the next page. So that's a little bit of what the differences are in those functionality. All right. So the thinking point on this one is just really, really being able to identify where your organization needs to build capacity. The follow-up question to that one is here. You've got 500 words to be able to dig into really what your organization is going to be doing for this work within the time period that you have. And again, this is where working outside of the application platform is really going to be helpful to be able to brainstorm and connect the capacity areas to what you want to do as an organization, and really identifying what are those key activities that you're going to need to do to be able to carry out the project. So if your organization needs to or plans to hire staff or personnel, or bring on a consultant, this is where you want to list out those activities and describe the work that's going to be completed. And all of that, that work to be completed, and I see your question over there in the Q&A, Melissa, is the completion date based on the actual program or the capacity building? And the completion date is on the for the period of your award. So if you think like, hey, we're going to bring on in 6 months, well, this is what we're going to do, then that's your 6 months. Or, hey, we're going to take the full 12 months and work towards this goal. We might not finish it, but we've got 12 months, and this is how we're going to get there. And actually, with some of the other questions we have, we'll talk about how you can measure that and report that back out. So if you're For this question here, you've got, again, 500 words. So you can do paragraphs or you can do the bulleted formats there. But what we're looking for is for you to identify what the project will be doing to complete, what your organization is going to be doing to complete the project. So what are those key things that you're going to be doing within that time period? So are you going to be, completing, could be that there's, um, oh, let's see. I would say if you could drop stuff into the chat with some ideas, we can look at those too. But if you've got like, hey, for the next 3 months, we are going to work on, going out into the community and identifying those networks and building our outreach, so that people know who we are. Then, you'll spend 3 months doing that. And then, okay, for 6 months, we're going to work on building our contact lists on things. So this whole piece of breaking it down and identifying the descriptions, it's okay if it takes some time. Again, for this one, we allotted for, we suggest that you spend, it could take up to 4 to 5 hours to do this part. And this is one where, around your key activities, we've got the next upcoming webinar on describing your project. And this is one of those questions that overlaps between both competitive and non-competitive. But for this application, it's really around, what your organization is going to be doing, and how these activities are going to really begin to align with those capacity areas, that you were mentioning. All right, so Manisha is going to actually go through like what the additional support is that that React for EJ is be able to offer, but we'll be able to also share those dates for those upcoming webinars, and info sessions as well. All right, so you've got the activities that we've mentioned that you outline and detailed and listed for that previous question. Now to respond to this one, we want you to think about, and at the end of the day, what does success look like? So we want you to share that here. We want you to think about the work that you're doing and what your organization wants to accomplish, and take the time to think about that. How will you know that this funding has helped? So if you've got an activity that you've listed out, how do you know that you've finished that activity or that you've made progress on that activity? Now, success here isn't going to be solving the Superfund around the corner. It's only $75,000. It's not going to do that. But if your goal is that you've increased awareness in your community of this local risk, then that's your activity and that's what you're working towards. And so how you're, this is where you can identify what that goal is and how also you're going to, know that you've made those steps towards that, objective. The other piece here that you can include is also how this is then going to help you move forward in the bigger picture. So this is, kind of ties back to where we say the foundational support. The goals for here is how you're going to then be able to use these steps to get your organization prepared for the bigger projects. This is just the starting point. So take the time to talk with others in your organization. What you're thinking about as you're pulling this together and as you're down in the weeds on this, what you think of, oh, this is great. At the end of the day, we're going to be able to do this. Well, have a conversation with others in your organization because they might also see other things that you haven't seen as well. So your success might be different from someone else's success, but there's that, together that vision of success is going to be even broader, and including those different perspectives in here, and those different benefits, related to each of those different activities is going to be really important, in terms of communicating, the how and the why your organization, is able to do this. This is another one of those where it's going to take a few hours, to be able to get through it, and that's okay. Again, this is not intended for you to just knock it out in 30 minutes. That's not the goal. We do want you to think about this, of how you're going to be successful, and how you can fulfill, those activities as you move forward. So, just giving yourself a little bit of grace because building organizational capacity is an ongoing activity. Any organization is going to be continuing to try and build their capacity, and they're going to need to go through rebuild cycles there. So go ahead and give yourself the ability to just focus on what you can accomplish within this time period. Don't try and boil the ocean. Um, but think about what specifically you are hoping to accomplish and how you're going to know that you've made that progress, that you have that milestone and that been able to move forward to be able to celebrate that. All right. Next, this is about your work plan. So communicating your plan for success. So what we're asking here is how will your organization plan for the timely and successful achievement of the objectives in your proposed project? How are you going to know that, like, what's your timeline for this? So you can see we've kind of laid out what are your activities? How do you know that you've done your activities? And now this is around figuring out how long it's going to take for you to do those different things. So if you've got those Post-its or index cards or however else you organize your thoughts, start thinking about how much time something is going to take. So what does your timeline start to look like? When are you going to begin certain activities? When do you think you'll be done or to that stopping point? How are you going to track the progress of your organization? So you can think about this again and breaking it out into an outline of quarters. So in the first 3 months, we're going to do this. In the next 3 months, we're going to do that. The first 6 months, we're going to have this accomplished. By month 9, we want to be here. So those are the things that you can break out in this response here. So if you've already said what you want to do, this is where you're going to highlight when you're going to do that. So you can flag those milestones along the way and be able to identify when you want to celebrate those accomplishments because you're doing a lot of really good work. And that's what we want to make sure that these projects are doing and moving forward. You've got 250 words, so that's where an outline might come in handy here. And this is, again, we're not looking for the complete in-depth, here's your 5-year strategic plan. We're looking for the outline of what the activities are and those key milestones as you're going through. And Tiara, I see your question over there about can adjustments be made to the proposal request after receiving the administrative review recommendations? And the answer is yes. So the determination from when you have your initial administrative review is if there's any areas where your application's not responsive or meaning we're not sure how you like if you missed a point on one of the on the tell us about your organization. There's two options for two outcomes for that initial administrative review. One is that it advances and everything's good in there and it can go straight to the community advisory board for determination as a non-competitive. If there's other areas where, oh, we need a little more detail on the budget, then that's where we'll send it back and say, hey, it'll be returned. And that's where you're able to make revisions prior to going to the CAB for final determination. And if at any point, if you've pushed that submit button and you're like, oh my gosh, I pushed submit way too early, just let us know. So contact the administrator and ask them apply, and we can always they can push that application back to you and return it to you so you can make those revisions. So as long as it isn't already with an external review or already, which would be as if it were a competitive, but as long as it hasn't been moved over to the CAB for determination, you can always recall that and make revisions as you like. All right, budget. Okay, so this is the third section of the application. I've got one slide on this because we've got a whole nother webinar that's going to be covering this. And you'll see down there, actually, I didn't even put it on here, but the time that it's going to take you to do a budget is going to be about 12 to 13 hours. So to the question about the administrator, providing the administrator contact in SM Apply, go up to the top, it says it's contact or help or support, and then contact administrative on there. And I'll see if during our Q&A we might be able to pop in there. But we're about to start running short on time, so I want to make sure that we can get through these pieces. All right. So the good part is that there are three budget fields that you can just automatically put in as zero. And those are going to be equipment. And under the new federal uniform guidance, that is the ceiling for that is now 10,000. And a computing device, if you need a computer, that is considered a supply. It is not a piece of equipment. A backhoe is a piece of equipment, and that's not allowed on a for the non-competitives. Also not allowed are construction costs. Do not try building something or tearing something down. That's why we have tier threes. And then also for indirects, those costs are not allowed for the non-competitives because these awards are going to be set up as fixed price awards to help make the payment easier and also to make the reporting easier. So the indirect costs are not allowed on fixed price awards for EPA. And so for this, if you have any fringe benefits or any others, those need to be incorporated in, those costs already need to be incorporated into your personnel or fringe benefits. We'll dig into this a little bit more during the budget webinar in about 2 weeks. So that's going to be on the 22nd and 23rd for that. So the easy part is that you could just put zeros in there to be able to move forward. And this is where you'll probably run into trying to get to that last question where it's going to say, hey, you need to complete this. You can put just a zero in there or a 9 or something. As some apply, that is our apply.thrivingenvironments.org, and that's how you can get to it. And I think Manisha or Tatiana can actually drop that link in there, or you can get to it by going through the website to be able to reach it there as well. Our last section is going to be asking about technical assistance you've received. This is a question that we really encourage you to complete this. It really helps us as a grant maker as well as React for EJ and CERC in terms of understanding the support that you've been able to receive in our reporting. It doesn't impact your application in any way. It is just for our information collection purposes. It's not shared with the CAB, so it's not part of the decision making, so they don't see this piece of that. And you can be used. Part of it is if you haven't received technical assistance, then we can also use this to be able to say, oh, hey, we want to refer them over to React for EJ, or oh, I think they're a really great candidate for CERC. And so this is where we can also identify and be able to make those referrals from grant makers over to the Tic Tacs. So I want to hand things over to Manisha to share things and highlight some of what React for EJ is doing around technical assistance for this program. Manisha?
Thanks, Christine. So good evening again, everyone. I'm really excited to share the ways in which EPA Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or as we affectionately refer to it as the TICTAC, are supporting communities in applying for the Grant Makers Program. This evening, I'm going to talk specifically about the services for the TICTAC Technical Assistance Center in Region 4 and the services we'll be providing for communities applying for TCGM funding. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the React for EJ team specifically will be supporting all organizations applying for an EJ TCGM award, excuse me. This support, in addition to providing React for EJ's existing services to Region 4 residents. TCGM specific support services include weekly office hours, topical webinars, weekly application work sessions, and biweekly SAM.gov registration sessions led by EPN. Office hours will be held once a week. These are group-based virtual sessions via Zoom where questions are answered in real time. Pre-registration for these sessions is required so that we can learn in advance what individual needs are prior to the session. You can register on the events page at www.reactforej.org. And Tatiana, thank you so much for putting that in the chat as well. The next office hours will be held on Tuesday, January 14th from 12 to 1 Eastern Standard Time, 11 to 12 Central Time. Topical webinars will be held once or twice a week beginning in January and will also be recorded. They will consist of 4 different topics that can coincide with different sections of the application that include describing your organization, developing a project, creating a budget, and applying for non-competitive awards, which is where we all are today. These sessions will be recorded. The next webinar, which is developing your project, is on January 15th from 12 to 1 Eastern, 11 a.m. to 12 noon Central. You can register on the TCGM website at thrivingenvironments.org or on the application page at reactforej.org/events. We will also be holding weekly application work sessions every Thursday from 3 to 4 Eastern or 2 to 3 Central. These virtual sessions will be group-based with breakout sessions that will focus on specific sections of the application. Pre-registration is required, and again, you can register on the reactforej.org events page. Finally, the EPN, or the Environmental Protection Network, a regional partner of React for EJ, will be holding SAM.gov office hours every 2 weeks on Wednesdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, 1 to 2 Central. And these are virtual sessions that will provide help starting, continuing, or completing the SAM.gov process. Once again, pre-registration is required. And the next SAM.gov office hours is January 15th from 2 to 3 Eastern, 1 to 2 Central. You can register for this directly on the EPN website. If you find it at all difficult to attend these sessions because of timing, technology challenges, or other issues, please let us know via our website, which is reactforej.org, or our 1-800 number so we can find a better way to accommodate your needs. Christine, I'll turn it back over to you for questions.
All right, and I'm answering some questions over that we've had over in the Q&A. And Tatiana, can you help me on identifying some of these that we might be able to answer live with the time that we have remaining? And I know we've got 8 minutes here. So let's see if we can get through maybe 3 or 5. Actually, we've got 4 that are still open. So let's see if we can get those. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Sounds good. I'll start with some of the easy ones. Dr. Christina asked, does the start date of our project have to be a future date, or can our date have a retro date?
All right. So your project should be a future date. And for a non-competitive, you're only asked about the period, the total time, total number of months that you need, and you're not asked for a specific start date. On the competitive projects, and those will be covered during the describing your project period, or describing your project webinar, that's where you're going to be asked for when you would like to start your project. And so we suggest that date be about 3 to 6 months from whenever that target submission date is that you're choosing. So if you're applying for the January 31st deadline, then we want to suggest that you have something that's maybe an April 1st or later date for that. So yes, please future. Unfortunately, we can't do pre-award costs or be able to retroactively um, um, date those awards because that you have a set period of time for those things. So, yep.
Great. And just know that, yes, you will have access to this presentation and recordings after the call. So the next question is for clarification. Is there a list of what constitutes supplies, given a computer is considered a supply and not equipment?
Yeah, so that is something we are definitely going to be digging into in our upcoming budget webinar of what constitutes supplies and what also constitutes other, and because those are 2 categories that even experienced organizations that are putting together their budgets can kind of sometimes get mixed up on. And I say that because I've been from the experience that I've had writing budgets, trying to tease those out, and especially how EPA wants to see some of these budgets in terms of those breakdowns. So the what qualifies under supplies is going to be, we'll provide a list of what those examples are. And then if there's specifics that you have questions about, we've got some of those that are coming out in our FAQ. So frequently asked questions, because we've gotten a bunch of questions, but we'll also cover those and incorporate them into the upcoming webinar as well. But it's a really good question. Yeah. Mhm.
Great. So we have one more, and this is a little bit more open-ended. So do you think non-competitive grants under this NOFO will be challenging to fulfill?
It's a really good question, Mary. And I think it's there. challenging in the sense of being able to identify what your organization is going to be able to accomplish within a period, and being able to really define what that project is going to be around your capacity building. So I think it's the challenge is going to be articulating it. I think once you can name it, once you can identify it, once you can put it into words, into what you're going to accomplish, or what you hope to accomplish, I think that's going to make it a little easier to be able to break down and fulfill. And it might be, there's the other part about why it's really important to kind of just work outside of the application system, is that we did this very linearly from like, hey, what's your title, all the way down to like, hey, what's your work plan? It might be that you really need to start with, what is your success? Like, where do you want to be in 12 months as an organization? And what's going to help you get there? And kind of working back from that to then break it down. And then, you're like, oh, we've got this really great title at the end of the day. And here's our activities. And here's what we're going to achieve. So as you're thinking about being able to build your organization's capacity, being able to fulfill the work here for these projects, or for the project that you're proposing, is nothing says you have to start with what's the title. That's actually one of the last things you could probably do. But we've got to be able to identify different applications. That's why we put it up front. So I think the challenge is identifying what's going to fit within those 12 months for your organization that's really going to help you move forward on the issues that you want to be addressing.
We just got,
And
oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No.
We just got one more question. I was going to make sure to address it before we ran out of time. So they had a question about the post-award reporting requirements, if we had more.
Yeah, and so while I'm answering this one, Patrick, if you can go ahead and just pull up the roadmap for what we have up ahead also for the upcoming webinars and work sessions, so folks can see those. Also take a minute to complete the feedback poll there. So if you're awarded one of these non-competitives or the competitives, for the non-competitives, we have tried to make the reporting piece on this one much easier and much more streamlined. So you're going to have a template that has what the reporting requirements are around your activities, and you're also going to be matched up with a grants coordinator and a grants program officer. So you will have somebody that you are working with to also help make sure that you're meeting those reporting requirements, because again, for non-competitives, these are going to be, these are intended to help organizations that have never received funding before, who've never had to meet reporting requirements. So for those, the reporting is going to be quarterly, and the invoicing is going to be also, it's going to depend on what your organization is set up to do. And we're going to dig a little bit more into that again with the budget, and then we will probably end up having more webinars in the future based off of what we need. So please let us know what other information and pieces that you need. All right. Yeah, so Aston, how can we get to the last webinar? Go to the website. So for region 4.thrivingenvironments.org, and actually if we can get, Patrick, if you want to go to the next slide, make sure that you have completed this page on the website. This is our contact us page, so that you're on the mailing list so you can get that information. And then on the next slide, this has our website, so you can go to, like I said, region4.thrivingenvironments.org, or send us an email at info@thrivingenvironments.org to be able to submit your questions of saying, I can't find the link, where is it? You can send it there, and our representatives are standing by. So they'll be able to assist you. So we encourage you to just share this information with anyone who is unable to register and attend today's session. As we said, it's going to be recorded, or it was recorded, and it will be posted online. The link to the registration and session information is also provided in the chat. And yeah, if we can go back real quick to the QR code there for folks, thank you. So check your email for updates and the webpage for additional updates as well. And so make sure that you are staying connected so that you're getting information from us. You can also follow us on all of our social media channels, subscribe to our YouTube channel, uh, um, and be able to follow us for those upcoming news and resources. So that was a whirlwind. Again, it was recorded, so all of this information, all of the slides will be available to you as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at an upcoming webinar, work session, or office hours where you can bring your questions, ask more questions. We're happy to answer them. So thank you and have a great evening.